Kia ora whanau, ngā mahara mai ki te kōrero Touch Compass with Caroline Bowditch today. I'll just kick us off with a really brief, quick karakia. Orihia te pō whiri marama, tomo kia kau, te ao whatu tangata, tātai ki runga, tātai ki raro, tātai ahorau, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. A quick translation: from confusion and darkness comes the light of understanding. From our understanding of the world comes unity as people. We are interwoven with the above, with the below, with what ties us. We are interconnected, allied, together, as one. Kia ora, and I really hope you enjoy today's kōrero with outstanding disability leadership exponent, Caroline Bowditch. Kia ora.
Amazing. Thank you, JT. So just before we get started, kia ora everyone. I'm Izzy Robinson. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the creative producer here at Touch Compass. I just wanted to give a little housekeeping for this webinar. So today I'm wearing a light blue button-up, white framed glasses. My long brown curly hair is tied up in a bun behind my large black headphones. And behind me is a video background of a white wall with the Touch Compass logo on my upper, I want to say left, but it might be mirrored, so it might be here. Welcome to all of you for our third webinar for our International Creative Leadership Series. We're so glad you can join us, and we're so excited, we are so excited to present all these amazing leaders and artists. So some technical housekeeping. First of all, during the webinar itself, if you could please mute your microphones, that would be great. However, in terms of your video, if you want that on or off, it's totally up to you. It's a very relaxed webinar, so eat, drink, come and go as you need to, whatever you'd prefer. If you're looking at your screen and it's just a whole series of blank names and no images, you can either click in the top right corner where the 3 dots are and go hide non-video participants, or you can select speaker view. That way it will just center whoever's spotlit, which would either be myself and or Caroline and our NZSL sign interpreter. So we have from Platform Interpreting 2 amazing New Zealand Sign Language interpreters who'll be with us for the entire webinar. They will interrupt every now and then and to swap over. So when that happens, we'll just take a pause and swap between the 2 of them. At the end of Caroline's webinar, we'll come to the Q&A section. So, and of course, please feel free to turn your cameras back on, unmute yourselves, come on into the conversation. Caroline and I will be monitoring that live. So if you've got a question, raise your hand. There's the hand raise icon at the bottom, or just unmute yourself and say hi. We'll also be checking the chat. So Zan and myself will be monitoring the chat on Zoom and on Facebook Live. So if you have any questions that you want to stay anonymous, you can ask them, send them directly to me or Zan, or just pop them in the chat and I'll read them aloud when we get to the Q&A. If you have any issues at all, message Zan or I directly and we'll try and fix it as soon as we can. I think that's everything. Again, if you've got issues, let me know. And so it is now my great pleasure to invite today's speaker to the screen. Please welcome Caroline Bowditch.
Thanks, Izzy. Kia ora, everybody. This is something that I've learned from the lovely Rodney Bell over the last few months, that I'm allowed to say kia ora, even though I'm not a New Zealander or not from Aotearoa. So thank you so much to Touch Compass for inviting me to be part of this incredible series of conversations that you're having. It's a real pleasure to connect with you all. And as Rodney would say, to share space with you. So brilliant. This afternoon, I'll begin by describing myself. I am a short, white, Australian woman who's just turned 50, terrifying, wearing red rimmed glasses. And today I am wearing a pink top and have outrageous dangly earrings on with lots of multiple colors, including pink. And I'm coming to you from the lands of the Boonwurrung people, of the Kulin Nations. And I want to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and future. It's an honor and a privilege to live and work on these lands that have been tended and cared for by the traditional owners for so long. I don't live here lightly, but I try and tread lightly. And I'm coming to you from my home office. So behind me is a very full bookcase, which contains lots of work by deaf and disabled writers that I admire, amongst lots of travel books and various other things. So yeah, as I said, it's a pleasure to be here. And today I'm going to take you through some of my, I suppose, my artistic journey of how I got to where I am. I am best known, I suppose, as a performer and a choreographer, but I currently have the role as CEO at Arts Access Victoria. And today I really want to introduce you to some of the significant people that have essentially helped my journey. I think I always want to be acknowledging the people that have helped me on this journey, and there have been many. I haven't got to the places that I've got because of my outstanding brilliance, but because other people have recognized talent in me, and or decided or thought that I was worthy is not the word, but that it would be good for me to be involved in various things. I'm going to be using a series of slides which are going to have images which I will describe as we go through, and I'm also going to show you a short video as part of the presentation. I'm going to chat to you for around 40 minutes, as Izzy said, and then we'll have time for questions. I'm just going to check in with our lovely interpreters about the speed at which I'm going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline.
Pleasure. I'll try and keep that up. I have a really bad habit of running on, so I'll try not to do that. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen.
So if we could actually just swap the interpreters now, please, Caroline, it'll be a good time.
For sure.
Thank you.
No worries. So I've titled my presentation for today, From Little Things, Big Things Grow, which for some of you will know there's a very famous Paul Kelly song from this title, where it's very much about connecting to the First Nations community in our country, and is talking about what it often takes is just one person to make a decision, and things can completely shift within an economy, within a country, within a kind of social structure. And yeah, I've been privileged to lots of those people that have, as I said, seen small things in me that have been allowed to grow, or have been nurtured or supported by other people. As I said, I've been best known as a performer, a maker, a teacher, and often as a provocateur. I've also been described as a mosquito buzzing in the ears of the arts industry in the UK, but now very much back in Australia. So I'm just going to change slides. So this is a photo of me when I was 4. I am wearing a very homemade, oops, it's going to do its own thing, a very homemade blue jumper. I have long dark hair, and part of it is tied up on top of my head. And at this stage, my eyes are very deep blue. And I have kind of a little smile on my face. This is my mum's favorite photo of me from when I was little. Clearly, I was small and innocent at this stage, and had lots of dreams. I wanted to be either a figure skater or a dancer, but mostly I spent a lot of time being a teacher, playing a teacher and bossing my older brothers around, and also loved playing shops where I would gather things from the house and try and sell them to my family. Clearly had some entrepreneurial ambitions at that stage. What I would love to do is to show you a tiny video that gives you a bit of a sense of some of the stuff. Will introduce you a bit to my work. It was made by a filmmaker that I met when I was working in Dundee in Scotland as Scottish Dance Theatre's dance agent for change. And I will talk more about that role in a little while. Izzy, I'm just going to check in with you that the slides are all working at your end and that the sound is all good at this stage.
So far, so good.
Great. Just because all I have on my screen at the moment is my slides. So you've all disappeared, but I'm just going to trust that it's all going swimmingly unless anyone gives me a yell. So I'm just going to stop this share and I'm going to share this short video. So just before I press play on it, this is a video that was made, as I said, in Dundee, based in a dance studio. It's a variety of myself talking to camera and showing some segments of dancing happening in a dance studio. Primarily, I am out of my motorized wheelchair, but sometimes I am in my motorized wheelchair and I talk about what's happening in the studio as it goes. So yeah, here we go. And the title of this, interestingly, is Inspiration, a Study of Movement. And we can talk about the word inspiration at some point if we want to, but this piece was named by the filmmaker, definitely not by me, because as we know, can be a problematic word for us in the disability community, although Rodney and I have had some really interesting conversations about it. So here we go. Let me know if the sound's not coming through or anything. I'm Caroline Bowditch and I am a performance artist, choreographer and dance maker. I'm based in Dundee, but I'm originally from Melbourne. So I've been a wheelchair user all my life. I got my first motorised chair when I was 8, and I truly discovered what it was to be an independent person. So I've been dancing all my life. I used to dance very badly on my next door neighbour's dining room table, clad in lycra, pretending that I was Olivia Newton-John in Greece. So quite fancied myself as a dancer, but never really thought I'd do it as a job. And now I do. I started dancing more formally when I went to university to do an undergraduate degree in performing arts. Dance was my least favourite subject, and it was because the dance teacher wasn't quite sure what to do with me. So she would kind of send me off to the side of the room and say, "You just make up your own version." Little did I know that my choreographic career would start so young. So today in the studio we've been doing an inclusive experiment, is what we're calling it, where I'm learning how I would cover a non-disabled dancer in a piece that's called Love Games, which has been choreographed by one of the dancers within Scottish Dance Theatre. I have a very lucky life. I get paid to do what I love. I get to do it every day. I get to work with people that potentially other people overlook. I get to ask questions that other people don't want to ask. I get to dance, and that is the most exciting, invigorating, joyful thing that I've ever done in my life. We should all dance. We should all dance every day, not just today. So a little bit of an insight into the work or how I dance. That's often one of the biggest questions that I get asked. And for lots of you, I know that integrated dance is not unfamiliar to you, and you are either a disabled dancer yourself or you work in this space. But it was often the question that I was asked primarily by London taxi drivers when they said, "So what do you do, love?" And I would say, "I'm a dancer." And they would kind of be puzzled and look at me and say, "But how do you dance?" And I would literally send them a link or tell them to go to my website or have a look, because it was easier to show than it was to explain. I forgot to say in my audio description pre that video showing that when we filmed this, I had very short blonde hair, which is now long gone, but was very fun at the time. If anyone wants to look at that video again, you can access that via my website, which I'll give you the link to towards the end of our conversation. So I'm just going to take you back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to share that with you now. So I'm going to move on to the next slide from here, moving on from me as a tiny person. So, I'm sorry, I've got things playing in the background. Let me just try and get rid of that. Distracting for me. Sorry. Apologies for that. Let's have another go. So on the screen now is a slide that literally says crucial people in my artistic development. And as I said up front, I haven't arrived in this place on my own. I have been given massive opportunities by people, and interestingly, most of them are women. And I would describe myself as a reactionary choreographer. I make the work that I think needs to be made, and I do that with joy and with fire in my belly. But none of it would have happened if it weren't for Janice Florence, who some of you will be familiar with, who is the artistic director of Weave Movement Theatre. Arts Access Victoria, that I'm now the CEO of, in 1996, ran a program called Movable Dance. And I'm just going to switch my slides because I'm going to talk about each of these people as I go through. Kanduko Dance Company. So on the screen is an image of 6 dancers from Kanduko from many, many years ago, including the lovely David Toole, who left us now some years ago, but was an incomplete trailblazer in the space of integrated dance for many, many years. So Kanduko were coming to Australia for the first time in 1996, and Arts Access Victoria decided to establish a 12-week program that was called Movable Dance, that was to introduce dancers to the concept of contact improvisation so that we could participate in workshops being led by Kanduko, and we had the basis of some of the skills. And Janice Florence was one of the leaders of that program. As someone who lives with fragile bones, getting in touch, I mean, starting in contact improvisation, not the most sensible thing to do, but was the most incredible experience in my life, because it allowed me for the first time in my 26 years to actually find the edges of my body, find the edges of my kinesphere, and to really land in my skin. And it was the first time that I had the opportunity to discover that this body that I'd grown up thinking was strange or awkward or didn't fit in had incredible possibilities and had a uniqueness that no one else had, and that was joyous and to be celebrated and embraced rather than rejected. I used to describe those classes or those sessions as a bit like somebody was handing me the biggest box of chocolates I'd ever seen and saying, these are just for you. You don't have to share them with anyone else. It felt like it was something that was I was doing just to feed my soul, and obviously also my physicality. So my real love of dance started in 1996. And at the end of those 12 weeks, the Weave Movement Theatre came out of those sessions, because at the end of it, there was a group of us that said, we don't want to stop dancing, we want to keep doing this. And it was then that I really started to dream about wanting to do this, as I said in the video, as a job. What would happen if I could dance all the time? I'm just going to change slides. And this next image is headed 2002, meeting Janet Archer. And there is an image of 6 dancers, 4 of which are sitting on large boxes, and 2 dancers, including myself, are sitting on the floor with crossed arms and legs in various configurations. In 2002, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life, and I moved to the other side of the world. I moved to the UK for love at the time. I now jokingly talk about it as my heterosexual holiday. I moved over to marry a man, which lasted for 5 years until I remembered that I was actually a lesbian. And so that wasn't going to work anymore. But in that time, I connected in with the Dance Development Agency in Newcastle, where I'd landed in the northeast of the UK. And I was connected with Janet Archer, who then was the artistic director of a place called Dance City. And I remember having a meeting with Janet and saying, I want to continue dancing. What are you going to do about it? Because whilst they had this brand new building, there was nothing in terms of what they were programming or their classes or the kind of education of the people teaching that was particularly accessible to me. So through Janet, I was offered a mentorship with Kanduko, and what that mentorship did was allowed a residency to happen, which brought some of these people that are in this image together with me, from which we established a new dance company with a focus on performing improvised performance called the Fathom Project. And this image comes from a show that we made with Adam Benjamin, one of the founder members of Kanduko, called Slight. Going to move to the next image, which is 2004, Becoming Girl Jonah. And in this image, I am sitting on a bench in my bra and pants with a black feather boa. I'm in front of a mirror, and my colleague Fiona Wright is standing also in bra and pants in front of the bench that I'm in. There's a fantastic sign in the background that says, warning, articles are left here at owner's risk. Through the residency that I was offered through Dance City, I met Fiona Wright, who's in this image. And Fiona was a very established dance artist in the Northeast, and she made beautiful, intricate work, and was in the process of doing her PhD to become a doctor of dance, which I loved. But Fiona met me, and she asked me if I would do some movement research with her, basically on the premise of she had choreography that had been living in her body for 10 years, and she wanted to pass that choreography onto my body and see what it did. So she was just really interested in what would happen if we passed this choreography on. And then my version, or the version that generated from my body, she then learnt. So it was like this passing of choreography from body to body. At each stage, it was being modified, being enhanced, with the focus shifting to other things. Fiona and I went on to dance together for some years as Girl Jonah, and we danced in Dublin Dance Festival, British Dance Edition, Dance Umbrella, all these big kind of dance festivals that I'd never heard of, but were very impressive to other people. And they were being involved in these kind of festivals were the thing that really brought me to the attention of other people. But I was quite oblivious to how prestigious these things were. So I just kind of kept going, this is great. Whilst other people were like, this is really big. I was like, okay. But they were always brilliant and interesting. And it was just the two of us.
Could we have a swap of interpreters, Caroline?
Yes, please.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. You can carry on.
Thank you so much. So the next slide is headed 2007 under the influence of Janet Smith. And Janet Smith was the artistic director of Scottish Dance Theatre. And in 2007, Janet invited me to be part of a research, well, actually part of a tour that had come out of a research in 2005, where Scottish Dance Theatre, who are a mainstream contemporary dance company based in Dundee in Scotland, brought in 4 disabled dancers to join the company for a tour of a piece choreographed by Adam Benjamin called Angels of Incidence. And the 4 dancers included myself and Dan Dorr, who some of you might know, who's also Australian. And Dan and I were on tour together for a season, basically. It was a really interesting choice by Janet. And at the end of that tour, I kind of had a conversation with Janet and said, I think what we've done is really significant. I think what we've done is we've changed things. We've changed the landscape. We've changed the conversation. We have been presenting disabled bodies in front of audiences that didn't expect us, and there haven't been detrimental effects. So I stayed, out of that conversation grew this role as dance agent for change, which I stayed with Scottish Dance Theatre to do until 2012. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to keep moving through these. So the next slide is headed The Influence of Wayne McGregor, and this is the only man who features in my list of of kind of influential people. And when I said I was a reactionary choreographer, this is, I think, where I really got that idea. I went to see a piece. So Wayne McGregor, some of you will know, is the artistic director of Random Dance Company based in the UK. And Wayne and his company had performed a show called Ataxia, which basically meant lots of non-disabled dancers pretending to have ataxia. So ataxia is kind of non-regulated, potentially uncontrollable movement that some people experience. So some people with cerebral palsy may have ataxia. There are lots of specific disability conditions that include ataxia. And I became highly offended as a disabled person sitting in that audience to think there are 1,500 people sitting in this audience watching non-disabled people pretend to have a disability, whereas if we put real disabled dancers on the stage, we probably would struggle to get an audience. And that didn't feel right in my body, my soul, or my head. So I set about doing something about that. And I decided that around 2008, there was a really big push for SciArt, this kind of combination of art and science coming together. And I decided that I wanted to make a piece that drew on the DNA or my genetic mutation. And I was going to use that as the basis for the choreography of a piece of work. So I did. I made this piece called Proband, and I worked with the scientist that had discovered my genetic mutation. And I made a piece that we toured, and it's now, there is a show. It was a live work, and it also is a 7-minute dance film that you can access through the link that is on this screen, which we can also share with you in other ways. Izzy, I'm just going to check in with you on time.
We have 10 to 15 minutes, Caroline.
Before we finish up altogether.
Before we move to Q&A.
Okay, great.
So lots of time.
Great, okay. Thank you. So I'm conscious that I'm jumping backwards and forwards a bit here, but 2009, I am with Scottish Dance Theatre as their dance agent for change. And one of the things that I'm going to call them SDT, were doing was these things, performances for schools called interactives. And these interactives were an opportunity to, I suppose, expose young people to the way that dance is made. So it was things like we would bring out particular highlights from pieces of work that were in the repertoire of the company. And we would talk about how, we might talk about the lighting or the costumes. We might show bits of the choreography and show the timing of things and how the dancers are counting and how they all connect as it's happening. But Janet also recognized that by me being part of the company, there was an opportunity to really talk about my role and also to talk about why it was important and what I brought. But we also recognized that, a bit like the taxi driver story from before, we needed to show people rather than just talk about it. So in collaboration with one of the apprentice dancers that we had at the time, this is Tom Pritchard, who now is living in Australia, interestingly, and is working with Circa, but was working with Lucy Gehring. So Tom and I made this duet together called The Long and the Short of It. And I am 3'4", as we can see from this image. I'm quite tiny. We're sitting on a box together. And Tom is 6'6". So we are literally physically the long and the short of it. But it was also this little 3-minute, 40-second piece that just demonstrated so much and spoke so much to the audiences that we were showing it to. And one of the first times that we showed it was in Dundee, and a teacher, one of the head teachers from one of the local schools, put up their hand and just asked Janet, the artistic director, the question about, Janet, why are you only showing this piece to schools audiences? Why isn't this piece part of the main repertoire of the company? Why are you not taking it on tour? To which Janet didn't have a good answer. She was kind of like, yeah, it's a really good question. And before I knew it, I was on tour. Within 2 weeks, I was on tour with the company, performing the long and the short of it all over the UK and all over the world. So we took this piece to China, which stimulated a very interesting conversation, because in China, the politics around disability are very different to what they were in the UK. So there was lots of educating to do, and we did lots of workshops with dance practitioners in China, and the only disabled bodies or the disabled bodies that we were offered up in our workshops was the Paralympic basketball team of China, because they, I suppose, were a collective. They were easy to access, and they came and they had the most incredible spatial awareness. So it was a joy for the SDT dancers, and also the other dancers who had never worked with disabled bodies before were kind of quite blown away by what was happening. Still with Scottish Dance Theatre in 2010, Mark Brew was Associate Artistic Director. Janet Smith and myself teamed up to make this piece called NQR, and which stands for Not Quite Right, as lots of you might know. And up until 2008, before patients could get access to their medical records, NQR was written in lots of people's medical notes, and it was used to describe kind of a difference in someone, an othering in some way or other that couldn't be diagnosed as anything specific, but doctors would frequently just write NQR. So we wanted to reclaim that, and we made a whole piece around how much of ourselves we contain, how inauthentic we can be to be socially acceptable. So that was the basis of this work. And the images on the screen show these beautiful light boxes that we worked with. And I emerged under this small one that I am sitting at the end of, opposite one of the other dancers, with 2 light boxes in the background showing 2 of the other dancers' legs.
Can we please swap interpreters now, Caroline?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Okay.
Great. So the next slide is 2011, and some of you may recognize the fabulous Mark Brew, who is, I know lots of you have worked with in the past. In the making of NQR, as with making any work, there were lots of things that we didn't include. And at the end of that making process, Mark and I decided that we wanted to gather some of those bits that had been lost, and we made this little piece called Leftovers, which was a 10-minute piece that Mark and I performed together, made and performed together. And this, there are 2 images on the screen. One is of Mark very beautifully lit in a blue light, with me inside his shirt behind him, And the second image is Mark's bald head resting on my tiny squishy foot, where it molds to the shape of his skull, and my heel sits on his nose very gently. And this is a kind of counterweight position. We loved leftovers. Yeah, it really brought our humor into the piece. Yeah, and it's available through Mark's website, actually, if anybody wants to have a look at it. In 2012, some of you might remember, was the London Olympics, and connected to the London Olympics was a thing called the Cultural Olympiad. And 2012 was the year that a funding program called Unlimited was established. And Unlimited's target was to highlight the best deaf and disabled artists and makers in the UK. There were 24 commissions that all began at £50,000. So that's about, I don't know, 100,000, between 75,000, 100,000 kind of Australian dollars. So I'm not sure how that translates in New Zealand dollars, but it was a big chunk of money, and it was more money than had been invested into the work of individual disabled artists previously. So I was lucky enough to be one of those commissioned artists at that time. One of the other prerequisites, aside from you could only apply for £50,000 and upwards, was that you had to team up or be supported by a presenting body, a presenting organisation. And I was lucky enough to have established a relationship that had been growing since 2005 with East London Dance, and had been invited in 2005 by this fabulous woman called Kiki Gale to be part of a choreographic development project for deaf and disabled choreographers. And so our relationship had remained, and East London Dance became my presenting partner for my commission that I made, that was called Leaving Limbo Landing. And essentially it was about my journey from Australia and to move to the other side of the world by choice, but how for the first 18 months, I didn't land. I felt like I was in some strange limbo. And again, there is a small film that goes with this piece that you can access through my website. It involved 6 dancers. It was an outdoor work. It involved a wall of water, an aerial rig. And the thing about Unlimited was that, and still is, that it's about making ambitious work. So it was a bit like writing my wish list, writing a list of the things that I'd never done in my life before, and I tried to put them all in one place, which is not massively advisable, but it's what I did. And we toured the work around the UK, including to Edinburgh Festival. And the interesting thing, and lots of you will know this, but Unlimited, since it started in 2012, has invested £13.9 million in the work of deaf and disabled artists, individual deaf and disabled artists, not dance companies, not collectives, but individual artists. We have never seen that sort of money invested in this part of the world. And I think it's really, for me, that's one of the big keys around why it's been, why often deaf and disabled artists in the UK are viewed as so much further ahead. It's because, I think it's because of that. They've had long-term, really significant investment, and it's allowed the bar to be raised. And yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. So this image that's on the screen, sorry, is a black background with the logo leaving Limbo Landing and a body, a dancer's body with their legs visible coming out of a white dress that has lots of luggage tags on it and bubbles in the background along with the East London Dance logo. My next influential woman is Frida Kahlo. In 2014, actually 2012, I was invited to be an artist in residence with Dance 4 in Nottingham. And I was given a studio for 2 weeks to do with what I would. There was no outcome required, but I had never had a creative space like that. And for the first 3 days, I wandered around, laid on the floor, sang to myself, kind of thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And on day 3, I thought, okay, what do I know best? And I thought, I know my bones. I know my bones the best of anything. And so I began to write the stories of my bones and think about bones and skeletons and exoskeletons and various things. And before I knew it, I was thinking about the Day of the Dead. And then I landed on Frida Kahlo, the Mexican disabled artist who is very well known, but rarely known as being a disabled artist. Even though disability is implicit in all of her work, it's very present. But I, as a 30-year-old, had seen a load of her work at the National Gallery of Australia, and never once did I think that she was disabled because she was so successful. And I'd never seen success like that from a disabled artist, which makes me really sad on reflection, but she was really significant. So I made this piece called Falling in Love with Frida to reclaim her as a disabled artist. It took me 18 months to make. I had £93,000 worth of investment. So that's about $170,000 throughout the research and making phase and touring the work. I had the opportunity to do 6 preview shows, which allowed me audience feedback, allowed me to embed that feedback and continue to think about the work before it even premiered. And that was amazing. And I would highly recommend, if you have the opportunity to preview shows before you as pre-premiere, then I think that's a brilliant thing. We had a sold out tour. We performed it in 6 countries. We received a Herald Angel Award for the work in Edinburgh, of which they give out very few each year. We made it with flexible spaces in mind. It was only ever performed for 100 people, and they were on 3 sides. But there was always the opportunity to move seats for people to be where they needed to be. And we had BSL, or a sign language interpreter, embedded into every show. So it wasn't whether people chose to come to a signed show or not. They were just always there. Every show was interpreted. And we loved that. And that interpreter became one of the performers. They learned choreography. They were costumed with us. And yeah, it was really crucial. We took it to Poland, where it was live, well, not live, but there was live captions of all of the text, and it was the longest post-show discussion we've ever done. Again, there is a promo video of it, but I will just encourage you all to head to my website and have a look at that. I want to just quickly talk about Becoming Sniggle, because the last person that's been a major influence is a woman called Liselott Loto. And Liselott is the marketing manager at Skånes Dance Theatre in Sweden, where I have done a lot of work. And Liesl over the years kept saying to me, do you know where we can access good quality work that includes diverse bodies for young audiences? And I was like, nah, I haven't seen any. So I set about doing some research for 18 months to really look for myself about whether I could find anything for them. And at the end of that 18 months, I discovered that I couldn't. So in my reactionary choreographer way, I decided not just to whinge about it, but actually to do something. So myself and my partner, Laura Hook, we co-created these two works. One, the work on the left, which is 3 performers under big green leaves, is called Sniggle and Friends. So Sniggle is snail in Swedish. And so I am in the middle as Sniggle. To my left is performer Zach, who was the musician, but in Sniggle plays Cecil, the cicada. And to my right is the beautiful Welly O'Brien, who was a dancer with Kanduko for many years and has been in much of my work. Was in Falling in Love with Frida with me, and another duet that I made with Laura for Kanduko Dance Company. And Welly is Flutter, who is a butterfly. And the other image on this page is from the second piece, which is called The Adventures of Sniggle, where my motorized chair gets completely covered in a giant, colorful, beautiful snail shell. And I am at the front. And in this image, in both of them, I am wearing antennae. And this piece is called The Adventures of Sniggle, and it's a promenade work. And we performed this in outdoor festivals up and down the UK in 2017. So along my journey, what has hindered? What's been made things difficult? Having work programmed. So sometimes venues seeing us as a tick box exercise, and or thinking about me as a disabled artist rather than the work, or thinking, well, I've already programmed one disabled artist this season, so I've kind of ticked that box. I don't need to do any more. Programmers being worried about audience responses. We know that there is a massive desire, and this has grown even more in the last 18 months. We know there's a massive desire for different stories, but programmers felt quite reluctant, I suppose, to program the work of disabled artists for fear of audience responses, or there'd be no audience, which we know isn't true. The weight of responsibility. I describe myself as an accidental leader. I didn't choose this for myself. This is something that other people have chosen for me, and there is a weight that comes with that. And it's a weight, obviously, that I don't take lightly. I'm regularly, as I am now, I'm regularly invited to speak on behalf of our community of people, and that's heavy sometimes, because we're not a conglomerate group. We're not homogenous. We're all very different, and everybody has different thoughts and opinions and skills and all those things. And I don't believe one person can encapsulate all of that, even though I bring lots of other people's stories with me. That doesn't come lightly. And I'm also asked to do lots of different things. I'm asked to be an advocate. I'm asked to be a performer. I'm asked to be a mentor. I'm asked to be all of these things. And how one chooses what the most important thing is can be challenging. And there's not enough hours in the day for many of us for all that we want to do. But what has helped? Asking the right people the right questions at the right time. I think being present, being a disruption, even if you're not causing a disruption, is a really interesting thing. I think when you put a disabled body within an environment where it potentially is unexpected, or wherever we go, if you have a visible disability, you change the alchemy of a situation just by being there. You somehow change the energy waves, and yeah, things can change just by being present. And that's why it becomes, I also think part of the pressure or the weight is that we often think if we're in a situation where we've finally got a space at the table, what if I don't ask the right question? Or what if people don't believe me, or whatever it might be. So I think it's something about doing lots of listening, but also being really astute at the question that needs to be asked. Having a sense of value and creative entitlement. We are all entitled to creativity, and we all bring value, even though we live in a world that doesn't necessarily tell us that. Staying connected to other deaf and disabled artists, to other artists in general, not being solo was really important to me. I had a body of work. I'd made a body of work and a track record. So when I arrive somewhere, I don't just come as, I suppose, an unknown quantity. People have a sense of what might be possible. And that really helped. And part of my role at AAV now is to help other people to build that body of work and that track record, or make sure people know of people's track record. Being a generator of opportunities that don't exist, not just a receiver. It became really important that I was generating opportunities for other deaf and disabled artists and other artists in general, rather than just passively waiting for somebody else to do it for me. That was really important. Building strong and long-term collaborations. As I said, Welly has been in lots of my work. Zach was a student of mine, and then I employed him as a musician, and we've made lots of work together, and we continue to make work together. Those things, having a team around you that you know and trust and can ask amazing things of, was really important, is really important. Significant financial investment, which we've talked about, and stating the facts. So articulating what I need in terms of access and as an artist without apology. I can't go to a venue that doesn't have a wheelchair accessible dressing room. I just can't. It's a fact. If you want me to come and perform, this is some of the things that I need. My little things decided to give up the ghost. And this is a quote that is sometimes attributed to Anita Roddick, who's the founder of Body Shop, and sometimes to the Dalai Lama. But it's one that's been very pertinent to me. And it says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, you've never tried to go to sleep with a mosquito in the room. We've all got the potential to change the landscape. We've all got the potential to change the alchemy. None of us are too small to make a change. Or to bring about change. I think it's about being in the right places at the right time, asking the right questions of the right people. But just being present is a really significant thing. These are my contact details, which Izzy, you're welcome to share this presentation with lots of people, with everyone that was here post this session. But I still have a website that is of my work, which is just www.carolinebowditch.com. And my email is also here, which is cbowditch@artsaccess.com.au. I'm now going to stop sharing and so that I can see all your lovely faces and we can get into the questions and answers.
we have a swap of interpreters, please?
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was such an amazing journey through your career. We have so many questions today, and we're a little bit over time, so we might not get to all of them. So apologies if you feel we haven't answered your question and you feel it's really burning, send it through and we'll take a few extra minutes. But the first question that came up, which I thought was really interesting, is what do you think non-disabled means?
It's a good question. I think some people talk about being able-bodied. So the opposite of if you're not disabled or you don't identify as a person with disability, that you're able-bodied, but you can be able-bodied and have a disability. And I think it's really important to make that distinguish. So we know that 80% of disability, for example, is invisible. So there will be lots of people that you know that technically are disabled, but they may not have disclosed that information to you. They may be completely able-bodied, but I would say that people that identify as non-disabled are people that don't identify as having a disability or don't articulate that they are disabled in any way.
That's great. Great answer, thank you. So the next question is about arts leadership. Arts leadership is very unique. Often leaders come through from arts practice and then elevate into management. So a balance is required between creative supporter and organizational leader. And you mentioned yourself earlier also with as an advocate. So how do you balance the artist within you from the management leader, and as well as you pointed out, and the advocate, and?
It's such a great question, and it's one of the things I've really grappled with in the role as CEO, because I promised myself when I took up this job that I would lead as an artist. And it's only now, after being in the role for 3.5 years, that we've just added artistic director to my role. I have continued to make work, but behind the scenes. So I made a solo on a brilliant disabled dancer in Northern Ireland when we were in lockdown earlier in the year. And I made a solo as part of the Seniors Festival last year. But all of those things happened not in my role as CEO at Arts Access Victoria, but with me as Caroline Bowditch, artist, I suppose. So it's only now that I'm beginning to really think about the skills that I bring and thinking about them as a value added to Arts Access Victoria, rather than thinking, oh no, I have to split myself in half and think, today I'm CEO, so I must manage things and people and all those sorts of things, rather than I'm being an artist and I can be creative and I can think bigger things. Because actually, I, a little while ago, realized that even being a CEO is still about choreography. It's still about making decisions. That's what choreography is, right? It's about working out the order that you put things in. And it's about generating new ideas. And it's about working out which ones you keep and which ones you don't. And that's all choreography. And that is also the role as a strategic leader, is to decide the direction that you're going to go and to really set where you want your end point to be. Yeah, so it was kind of realizing that a little while ago, that I was just kind of thinking, this is all just choreography. I know this really well, and that's when I can quieten my imposter syndrome that has surrounded me from time to time, kind of going, you don't belong in this role, there's no one else like you out there, you don't look like a CEO, all those sorts of things. I can quieten that by kind of going, but I'm a choreographer and I know how to do that. And I'm just going to choreograph, but I'm going to do it with different things.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful, intuitive answer. That's such a lovely image of what leadership means at that managerial level as well. Lucy's actually just popped a question in the chat for everyone, which is, what advice do you have for someone who loves creating but needs other support? And I think that's a question that a lot of us can relate to. So what, in your own experience, with creating, what advice can you give in that direction?
So Lucy, so lovely to see you again. None of my work has ever been made as a solo. I always have people around me. I keep pretending that I'm going to make a solo piece, but that never happens because I am a natural collaborator, but I can still lead that. And I don't, yeah. Lucy, do you know, have you heard of Lisa Simpson? Yeah. So Lisa Simpson, for those of you that don't know, Lisa is this amazing UK-based choreographer who invented, in collaboration with Adam Benjamin, like there's all these links, right, to Adam Benjamin. But Lisa invented the Simpson board, which allows, so Lisa is a non-verbal choreographer, but has choreographed full evenings of work using the Simpson board, which very clearly gives dancers directions about where she wants them to be without needing a word to be in the space. And people need to become astute at how to read the Simpson board, because that's the other thing, is that essentially Lisa needs an interpreter of the Simpson board, but now trains people in how to do that. And I worked with a young dancer who was also nonverbal, and the Simpson board was just like, well, she met Lisa. I was like, God, you need to meet Lisa. And so we brought Lisa to Scotland, and she worked with Ailey, and they worked with the Simpson board, and she was just, her whole world opened, and now she's studying dance at kind of TAFE level, because it was like, here's the tools, don't pretend it can't be done. We're going to show you how it can be. So I would just say, Lucy, I've never done it on my own. Surround yourself with the people that build you up and will protect you and will support your ideas, and allow you to be the leader.
Thank you, Caroline. So we have time for one more question, unfortunately. Unfortunately, there aren't time for more questions, is what I mean, sorry. So you mentioned earlier that you are a reactive artist. And so given the momentum that disability arts has gathered in the last 18 months to couple of years, what do you see as the future of disability leadership as that momentum grows and it comes more and more into the mainstream?
I want to believe that there are huge opportunities. I think one of the things I keep being reminded about is that the true diversity that the community, the general public, is calling for at the moment will not happen until we have diversity in our leadership. Because whilst privileged, non-disabled, white, cis people stay in roles of leadership, it will remain that way. And I was having a really interesting conversation with some disabled colleagues the other day, and they were kind of saying that the shift's not going to happen until we change that leadership, and we move out of that comfort zone and that space that we're so familiar with. And I think it's been really interesting for me being in this role at the different conversations that have been instigated, the strength that I can add to other disabled voices that feel like a really important part of my job. And it's also my responsibility in this role too, to look at, and I'm already looking at, who's taking over from me. This is the first time in 45 years of Arts Access Victoria existing that we have been disability led, that we've had a disabled chair of our board and a disabled identifying CEO. And that feels really significant, and it feels like a place we can't go back from, because the conversations that we have are really different and they can't be had by, they're just different. So we can't go back. And we are doing everything we can to really think about how we can place safely and culturally safely place deaf and disabled artists at the heart of mainstream organisations. And our plan is to do that through a cultural Agents for Change program that we're planning to establish in 2022.
That's amazing. So thank you so much, Caroline, for such an amazing webinar. It's just been wonderful to hear about your journey. For everyone watching, we'll be publishing a recording of this in a few days once we get a chance to make sure it's all there and with the transcript, so that you can watch it again. And
Kia ora, my name is Trish.
Kia ora, Trish.
I forgot you were happening today.
Trish, that's usually my trick.
No, I did what they're gonna hear about totally forgot.
Hi, Trish. So you'll be able to watch the recording. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today, but it's so lovely to see you pop up for the last couple of minutes. So as I was saying, the recording will go out once it's ready. And if you have any questions about this webinar, or you want to contact Touch Compass about anything, you can send me an email. My email is producer@touchcompass.org.nz. And thank you all so much for joining us. So just to close us out, I'll pass us over to John to give us our closing karakia. Thanks so much again, everyone.
Kia ora all, and thanks so much for joining us. Again, ngā mihi mai hoa ki te tautoko kaupapa o tēnei wā to Caroline. Thanks so much for supporting the purpose of today. Just a quick closing karakia from me. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea a te ara, kia tūru ki whakataa ai, kia tūru ki whakataa ai, haumi e, hui e, tā iki e. That which restricts us is cast aside. The pathway is now open for us to return to our everyday activities, allied together as one. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, everyone.
How are you, Rodney?
Thank you, Trish.
How's it done? How are you?